Hi, I hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I wanted to dedicate some time to talking about granulation in watercolor. I think these days granulation in watercolor is more popular than ever before, and we can see it very clearly by the fact how many watercolor brands have introduced completely new paints into their product lines just because people wanted to see them and use them. In the past, granulation in your watercolor wash was considered to be a fault in either your technique or a paint or paper that you were using. But now the modern watercolor technique is completely different and people are actually embracing imperfections and interesting effects. In this video, I want to share my favorite granulating watercolor paints and show some examples how I use them. I think I should also clarify at the beginning that when I say granulating watercolors, I mean the super granulating ones that were released in addition to the main colors, like the Daniel Smith Primatech series, for example, or the Schmincke super granulating one, because there are many basic colors that are also granulating on their own, like ultramarine or cobalt blue, but their granulation is not as obvious, and I don't think there would be any problems related to how you can actually use ultramarine in your work. So these colors are a bit easier to understand and to use. What I want to focus on today are these new exciting super granulating watercolor paints, because I remember first hearing about the Primatech series years ago, and I thought that the colors looked absolutely cool and interesting and beautiful, but I had no idea what to do with them and how to actually use them when you are painting. I remember buying my first ever Daniel Smith Primatech introductory set with the 6 5-milliliter tubes, and I remember I still have them because at the time I had no idea how to actually use them apart from just swatching them, being impressed with how nice they look, and just for some backgrounds or something else. It was really difficult for me to understand what is their purpose and why you would actually want to use them in your art practice. And the reason for that might be in the fact that these colors are often mixed from a variety of different pigments, or they already have a very complex shade which makes them difficult to mix with other colors. So you either have to use them on your own, which is hard because we are just used to using our basic pigments like phthalo blue, ultramarine blue, pyrrole red, like all the basic pigments that are usually included in the introductory sets. And that's what professional artists also actually use. They also use some basic pigments. That's why it's not very easy to find a place for these super granulating paints in your color palette. That's why I'm going to share what granulating colors I actually use in my regular art practice and how I integrate them into my everyday color palette. In my next video, I also want to share some general tips on how to use granulating watercolors in general, so that will not be related to my personal experience. I will just share general tips. The colors that I use can be roughly divided into 3 categories based on the main purpose and the main characteristics of these colors. These are the colors that I'm going to mention today, so you can see there are not so many colors that I actually use regularly, and some of them I actually not using that often anymore. I used to use them a lot in the past, but not that much now, but I will explain it later. So the first category, I call it additional colors. So I think this category will be what most people will be familiar with. In my point of view, in my artistic practice, what I do is basically I use all my regular colors that I would normally use for painting a picture, and then I would just add a granulating color in order to create some interesting textures, mainly for architecture, because when you paint architecture, you want to have this specific old weathered look on your building, whether it's old or new. Anyway, you don't really, if we're not talking about skyscrapers, you don't really find any pristine looking buildings on the streets, and granulating colors can help you a lot with that. I just add them to my regular mix to create some interesting textures. And the colors for that are lunar black. Of course, lunar black is the most universal and the most generic color you can find in granulating watercolors, and this is lunar black or oxide black from Rembrandt. I used to use oxide black, but now I finished this tube, so I switched to lunar black just because I had it in my collection as well. Hematite Violet Genuine, Blue Brown by Supervision, this is a new brand, and Bloodstone Genuine. I will be swatching on my Paul Rubens 50% cotton watercolor pad. I talked about this pad in one of my previous videos. I obviously didn't want to use some crazy expensive paper like Arches paper for swatching. That's why I decided to pick up something cheaper. First, I actually wanted to swatch them on some cellulose paper because granulation would be most obvious on cellulose paper, but then I decided to go for something a bit more cotton because I know that most people prefer to work on cotton paper. And then let's start with the first color, Lunar Black. This color is what can also actually be considered as a basic color because in many watercolor brands it's just called Mars Black and it's not considered to be something special. This is just a regular PBK 11 paint. So it has some pigment information, and this paint contains only one pigment. My swatches will be a bit messy today, I think, because if you want your granulation to show, you need to use a lot of water. You can't make any pristine looking swatches because it will not give the best impression of your granulating color. You can already see the granulation pretty clearly, I think, but of course I will bring the swatch closer to the camera at the end of the video so you can have a better look at these colors. You can add this color to any color in your palette and it will turn your color into a granulating one. Some brands even do that for you, like Daniel Smith, for example. So they created a whole lunar series based on this PBK 11 pigment. So I think if you have no idea what granulating paints are and you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can just buy this one PBK 11 tube and experiment with adding it to your favorite colors or to the colors that you want to be granulating colors. I use this a lot in my architectural sketching. For example, here you can clearly see Lunar Black showing here and here. It gives some interesting texture to your artwork. You are trying to hold the attention of your viewers by adding a lot of different textures and details, and the easiest way to do that is to just use some granulating paints because they will do all the work for you. The next one, which I use in a similar manner, this is Hematite Violet Genuine, and the reason I'm saying that is because when you add these colors to your regular color palette, you want them to be neutral. So obviously, if you want to keep the original color palette, you wouldn't want to add something super bright or something unusual that will ruin your color palette. So you need something neutral, like black, for example. If you add just a little bit of Lunar Black, it's not going to affect your color palette much. So your color will stay the same and you will just get this interesting texture added to your artwork. That's why you will see that in this additional colors category, I only have very neutral, very calm colors that are not going to interfere with the regular color palette much. And since I'm painting architecture, I think this color is very suitable for the color palette that is usually used for architectural painting. The next one that is also very similar, and all of these colors can be interchangeable within this category, is Bloodstone Genuine. They all act in the similar way and they are very similar to each other. The only difference between them is the shade. They have similar granulating characteristics. They granulate in a similar manner. I'm gonna be honest and say that I don't use Bloodstone Genuine that often because I'm very used to using these two colors and I just don't see the reason for replacing them with the Bloodstone Genuine. When you are used to using something all the time and you are very comfortable with using it, you just don't see the reason of introducing anything new. But I use it sometimes. Like I genuinely use this color from time to time because of its pleasant shade. It has this gray-violet shade. It's very muted and it's very nice. It's a lot more muted and calm than the hematite violet. So I think it's just a matter of taste and the matter of the color of your subject matter. These three colors are absolutely interchangeable for me. I can just pick one and be okay. So I don't need to have all three, and I don't usually use all three together in one artwork, so that would be just one of these colors. And the last color is a new one, and I could say that it is a different color, stands out from this trio that I've just swatched here. This color is by the new brand, which is called Supervision. It's a Chinese brand, and this color was gifted to me by this brand in a set of 15, I think, in a set of 15 granulating colors. I'm not going to go into details about this Supervision brand. If you're interested, just let me know and I can do a review of this brand in a separate video. But they are something similar to Schmincke super granulating paints. They are a lot brighter than anything you see on the market. That's why it's even more difficult to integrate them into your regular color palette. This color was special because it matches the color palette that I would normally use for painting architecture. That's why when I swatched all of the colors, this one was the one that I knew how to use it. Like, I just knew it without thinking, and that was the easiest color for me to integrate into my color palette, because I use turquoise a lot, and this turquoise is not very bright, is not very saturated, exactly as I like it, and it has these brown particles in it, which is a great way to imitate rust in architecture, like in monuments, for example. And that's exactly how I use it. I'm going to show you some examples. So this is how I use this blue-brown Supervision paint, and this lamp as well. You can see how interesting it looks in sketches, how well it fits into the color palette. So when I see something light gray or gray blue, gray green, I immediately think of this color. It was a perfect match for my usual subject matter, so I think this color is absolutely amazing for architecture, for painting architecture. And here, for example, this is how I use this Hematite Violet Genuine. So I also just added some granulation into the wall behind this lamp, so it looks old and creates this special atmosphere. The second category I call substitutes. What I mean by that is that there are some colors that you can use as fancier replacements for your basic colors. And in my case, I will be talking about these 4 colors specifically. This is the category, I think all of the categories that I will be mentioning can include into themselves a whole variety of different colors. So you know how many granulating watercolors there are on the market today. You can include more and more and more colors into each of the categories that I'm mentioning today. But I will be talking about just 4 colors that I personally use. And as I said, I'm only mentioning the colors that I use quite regularly, or I used to use regularly. So I genuinely have experience of using these colors. And I haven't just swatched them a couple of times and put them aside and didn't know what to do with them. For me, these fancier replacements for some regular pigments are Tundra Orange by Schmincke, Sodalite Genuine, Sleeping Beauty Turquoise, and Peerman Genuine. I think you can even guess which colors they are going to replace. I use this Tundra Orange as a replacement for colors like raw sienna or yellow ochre. I tried it accidentally last autumn. I bought this color last New Year and I didn't know what to do with it, even though this color was really pretty. And then I was experimenting a little bit with cityscapes, with trying different colors, and I thought, why not to try and replace raw sienna with this Tundra Orange, because in its mass tone it looks exactly like raw sienna or yellow ochre. And I think this is the basic characteristic of this category, that in their mass tone these colors look exactly like your normal pigments would look, and you will see this with all the other colors, and that's what I'm basing this category on, the overall look of the color. You will see some very interesting texture and granulation when this color is dry, and now this color is permanently in my color palette, so I use it all the time. Whenever I need this raw sienna looking color, I use my Tundra Orange. I will be really sad when this color is over because it's quite expensive. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to replace it with the same one. Now it feels like luxury, you know, just having this opportunity to use Tundra Orange instead of raw sienna or yellow ochre, but I'm going to enjoy it while I can because it gives a really interesting look. I'm going to show you one example. This is the piece I'm working on at the moment, and you can clearly see this Tundra Orange in action. You can see how interesting it looks. So all of these things, all of these different color variations are just coming from this Tundra Orange color. Like even here. It's very pretty, it's very unique and very unusual. Another color that I also use quite often is Sodalite Genuine. I think you can guess which color it replaces. I actually have it in my Daniel Smith travel palette, so I'm going to use this color from there. This color acts as a replacement for indigo, or just mainly for indigo, just your dark blue. But you can also use this color as a replacement for your neutrals, for your blacks. In my case, I use it instead of having any neutral tint or Payne's gray in my palette. So I only have this Sodalite Genuine in my color palette, and I mix all my blacks, all my dark grays from this color. It also feels a lot like luxury, you know, just using an expensive Series 4 color instead of your neutral tint, which is usually considered to be a Series 1 color. But it gives a very interesting look to your artwork. So it's something special, it's something unusual and not as boring as your neutral tint. So if you have a chance, if you, for example, have a lot of granulating paints that you don't know what to do with, you can just use them instead of your regular boring pigments. I mean, of course they're not boring, but like everyone is using neutral tint, and you can start and use something else instead of it, or instead of Payne's gray. Then I have Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. This is also a brand new tube which I bought to refill my pan. It's like more than half full at the moment, but because the tube was on sale, I decided to buy it now. And I use this color instead of cobalt turquoise or cobalt teal. All of the colors that I included into this category, I want to say it once again, that it is a very luxurious use of these paints because you can just get away with using your regular pigments like cobalt turquoise or cobalt teal. Even though this Sleeping Beauty Turquoise is a bit more muted and not as saturated as cobalt teal, for example, which is PG50 or PB28, you can still mute those bright colors. So it's not necessary to have this color in your palette. I'm using them just because I've already had them and I wasn't actually using them at the time, and I thought that I'm just wasting my paints and I wanted to do something with them. And so I started experimenting and I started swapping my regular pigments, my basic pigments, with these Primatech colors that I already had in my collection. I think this method would work best if you already have some granulating colors in your collection, but you just don't know what to do with them. But you don't have to buy granulating colors in order to replace your cheap pigments. Cheap pigments are okay. This is just something extra, something unusual. Maybe if, for example, you are bored and uninspired by your regular pigments that you have in your color palette and you want to try something new, you want to experiment with colors, so this is a great way to do that. I have another example. So here I used Sodalite Genuine to paint water instead of using something as indigo or Indian Throne Blue, and I think it looked really interesting. When you look at the granulation in the sky, in water, and it gives this unique look to your painting. I mean, of course, if you like granulation. There are people that don't like granulation, especially in water or in the sky. I do like it, and I like to experiment with it from time to time. And the last color that falls into that category for me is Peerman Genuine. This is also a relatively new and unused tube because I had a 5 milliliter tube from that Primatech introductory set that I used before. I think this color can be used as a replacement for a variety of different colors. light browns and reds. It's a very versatile color, but I use it as a replacement for colors like Venetian red, transparent red oxide, and so on. So this color, for example, I said that I use Sleeping Turquoise Genuine because it's more muted than Cobalt Teal, which makes it a bit easier to use because you don't have to mute it every time you're using this color. With this color, it's the opposite because it's a lot brighter than Venetian red or Indian red, so it has a very saturated red undertone. I will also show it to you closer when it's dry. But what is special about this color is that apart from having this bright red undertone, it also has brown or black particles that are separating from the brown ones. And it gives this interesting texture. So in a way, it's very similar to Lunar Black or to Hematite Violet Genuine because this is also a separating colors. And when it separates, you have very clearly visible black particles in this color. And once again, it's very useful for architecture, for cityscapes, and for things like that. It's very hard for me to say how you can use these colors, these granulating colors in other genres, for example, portrait or botanical painting or something like that, because I mainly work with architecture and I look at all colors from the architectural painting point of view. So when I look at these colors, I think, how can I apply it for painting architecture? That's my first thought, and that's the only thing I'm thinking about when I do that. I think especially for sketching and especially for urban sketching, these granulating watercolors would be great because you can achieve interesting effects. You can create realistic, interesting textures in seconds by just adding this granulating paint and adding a lot of water. So in this way, watercolor is working for you, so you don't really have to do much. This is the second category, also with 4 colors. I'm going to leave them to dry. And I'm going to talk about the last category of paints, the last 3 paints that I will include in this video, and they are called decorative colors. Colors that you can use for special effects like shimmer. They contain some glitters in them, which makes them even more difficult to integrate into your regular color palettes because we are not used to using or seeing glitters or shimmer in professional artworks, so you don't really know what to do with them. But they can be used in a fun way, especially for sketching, and I'm going to show the colors that I really like and that I managed to use in the past. To be honest, I don't really use this last category, decorative colors, very often these days, just because it's very much a matter of taste. So some people will like this effect, some people will hate this effect, maybe someone doesn't really care about them much, so it's a very personal thing, and I used to like them a lot because it was new, because it was something interesting, something unusual, but now, I don't know, I'm not very keen on these colors, but maybe in the future I will start using them again when I'm traveling. I'm still carrying a couple of tubes with these shimmering colors just in case I would like to use them again. These are the Kyanite Genuine, Graphite from Van Gogh or Rembrandt, they also have the same color in the Rembrandt line, and Sodalite Genuine. I don't have a tube of this color at the moment because I'm almost out of this color, so I'm just going to swatch it from my regular palette. I think these colors will be the most difficult ones to somehow integrate into your regular practice because of these special effects. Some people might think that this is not serious, you know, like serious watercolor artists don't really do glitters, but this color is really beautiful and unusual. I think I've been using this color continuously for a couple of years. I was absolutely in love with this color for a long time. I wouldn't even leave my flat without having this color in my bag. Okay, I will let it dry. It has this very sophisticated blue-gray look to it, which makes this color very versatile as well. Like it's not bright, it doesn't have a very unusual and difficult to work with kind of shade. So you can implement this color into any color palette, I guess, because it's so neutral. Then Sodalite from Daniel Smith as well. It's a very similar color, but it's more just a shimmering color, while Kyanite can also be considered a granulating color. So Sodalite is a bit more smooth. It's also a very neutral one, very muted, which would make it very easy to integrate into your color schemes. I had a bit of a problem with opening my Van Gogh graphite color. If you are a frequent Royal Talents watercolors user, you would know how much of a pain it is to open their tubes sometimes, especially when you haven't been using them that much. I wasn't able to open it, so I had to go and grab my new Rembrandt's graphite color. So I'm going to swatch this one instead. This one was thankfully very easy to open. This color is very similar to a graphite pencil, the marks that would be left with a graphite pencil. And because of that, it's also very versatile, very easy to use, and it can be used in a lot of different situations. I think it's even more versatile than Sodalite or Kyanite. You could even do some line works with this color. So imagine you are painting with watercolor, but you are trying to pretend that you are drawing with a pencil, if it makes sense what I'm saying. So you would just do some line artwork, but not with a pencil, with a watercolor instead. I don't know if you've heard of such a thing as watercolor graphite. This is basically a graphite in a tin. It's quite expensive, so if you, for example, can't buy this watercolor graphite where you live because it's not very popular and it's not very widespread, so you can just buy this graphite color and use it for your black and white monochrome studies. Okay, so that is it for the colors that I frequently use in my regular art practice. I want to say that I have a lot more granulating colors than just these 11. It's really difficult to find use for them sometimes, because normally you would just tend to use your regular basic pigments like ultramarine, yellow ochre, and so on. And I'm actually trying to push myself from time to time to actively use and integrate these granulating colors into my palette, just because I already have them. So when I just started with watercolor, I think similarly to many people, I was fascinated by all of these interesting colors and shades and different effects. So I was buying different things, trying them out, seeing whether I like it or I don't like it. So now I have a huge watercolor collection. But I use 10 to 15 tubes, 10 to 15 colors these days, and it seems such a waste of materials. That's why from time to time I sit down and I try to push myself to use something new, to try some new colors, especially such interesting colors as the Daniel Smith Primatex series. And some of them I don't really get yet, so I don't have any use for them. Some of them, as you can see, stay in my standard color palette, in my everyday palette. I'm going to show you how I use these Kyanite and Sodalite colors in my works a couple of years ago. As I said, I couldn't imagine leaving my house without these colors. So for example, here, this is Kyanite. I used it for background. You can see that it is granulating and it is shimmering. Or for example here, same Kyanite. I used to use it a lot to my backgrounds for my sketches, but because I don't really do this style of sketching anymore, I don't have a chance of using this color, but I've been thinking lately to reintroduce this color into my color palette, so maybe I will start using it again. I'm going to dry all the colors now, and I will show you how they look when they are dry. Okay, so they are dry now, and I can finally move them closer to the camera, so you can have a better look at these colors. What is this color if not some textural effects on some old building? Sleeping Beauty actually looks quite bright here, comparing to all the other more muted colors, but if you compare it to the cobalt teal, you will see the difference, that it's a lot more muted than the regular cobalt teal. I think this one would be really nice in the night sky, like you can see the stars. And here it's just some shimmering, so these are more metallics, like metallic colors, and this one is more like sparkling. I swatched them on the back of the paper and I kind of regret it now because I can see that the texture is not as visible as on the front side as here. So I think I should have swatched them on a different paper. I couldn't detach this sheet before it was completely dry because otherwise the page would get all wavy and not nice. That's why I just grabbed a random sheet of paper and it turned out to be a backside of the same paper. But anyway, I think these colors are more about shimmer and you can still see some granulation, like they do granulate a little bit, maybe apart from this one. I hope this video was interesting for you. I don't know what is your attitude towards granulating colors, if you use them, how you use them, and so on, but I just wanted to share my ideas and my opinion on them, that because when I see people swatching granulating colors online on YouTube, I usually see them just like appreciating these colors on their own, like trying to squeeze them in somehow into the painting. It's like they don't really fit, but you are really trying to fit them in. And I wanted to show that you can actually integrate them into your color palettes in a very natural way. Maybe it will not be news for some of you, so I'm sure some people are already doing this, but in case you didn't know what to do with these colors, I just wanted to share my point of view. Please let me know if you have any granulating colors that you use regularly in your everyday color palette. I would be really curious to know what these colors are and how you use them, and I'm hoping to be able to make a video about tips on how to use them, visual tips, not just showing my examples but just doing a couple of demonstrations. So if I have time to plan this video this week, I will release it next Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next video.